chaos in France. The news is true. And do you know the worst part? This happened because of a soccer match. Not in France, but in Africa. Pay attention. More than 60 people were arrested in France due to the numerous riots caused after Morocco's defeat against Senegal in the final of the Africa Cup of Nations. As you know, a few days ago, the final of the Africa Cup of Nations was played, where Senegal defeated Morocco 1-0. And even though Morocco was the big favorite to win, Morocco even had a penalty in the last minute, and Brahim Diaz, a player from Real Madrid, missed it. Well, in the end, Morocco lost, and this caused a whole scandal, not only in Africa, but also in France. To me, France feels like another African country. That's honestly how I see it. The migration crisis in France is so big that a match between two African teams caused chaos in France. Even though this match, in quotes, has nothing to do with France. But anyway, just look at that. It turns out that we all know there are many people from these countries living in France who even already have French passports. And even so, they were celebrating Senegal's victory, furious about Morocco's defeat. In fact, there's something curious. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. No, it's happened several times. And this has reached such a point that the French police are already getting involved. Did they already know what would happen? Please, pay attention to this article from a day before the final. France bans celebrations on the Champs-Élysées for the Africa Cup of Nations final. The authorities in Paris reported the adoption of special measures. Blah, blah, blah. Paris prohibits gatherings on the Champs-Élysées during the Africa Cup of Nations final. Imagine this article on January 17, 2026 and another on January 18 that year. Well, it turns out that chaos broke out on none other than January 19 after the Africa Cup of Nations final. Unbelievable. Seriously, that's completely crazy. But let's see how the media, or rather as I like to call them, the disinformation media, reported on the news. Pay attention. This is how the French police in Paris cracked down on Senegalese people for celebrating the Africa Cup title. Well, the Africa Cup of Nations. Basically unbelievable. I mean, this is how the French police in Paris cracked down on Senegalese people for celebrating the incredible title. Do we really not hate the media enough? Seriously, it's crazy. Here they tell us after the massive celebrations, they don't tell you that chaos broke out. No, they don't tell you about the celebrations in Paris for Senegal's title. The police cracked down and there were more than 60 arrests and riots. Impressive, that's how these outlets operate. This reminds me of the newspapers in Spain, where every time a foreigner, so to speak, commits a crime or commits some offense, the newspapers say young people did this, young people did that, and they always omit the nationality. But if the guy is Spanish, then they tell you far-right Spanish man, blah blah blah, always the same, right? But please, let's read the news. Senegal's historic victory in the African Cup was celebrated in the country. And also in France, where a large Senegalese community lives, estimated at 300,000 people, incredible, there are at least 300,000 Senegalese in France. And I'm talking about the legal ones, and it has to be said many times, the legal ones get their papers in very, very questionable ways. Seriously, it's crazy. At least 300,000 Senegalese live in France. Incredible, but let's continue. The day before the final, the Paris Police Prefecture had banned gatherings on the Champs-Élysées for the African Cup of Nations final. In addition, it also banned fireworks after the team won its second title. Senegalese celebrated in the streets of Paris, leading to riots, over 60 arrests and police repression. Okay, but I have another shocking fact to share. Seriously, it's crazy. The match sparked enormous media interest in France. The live broadcast on M6 gathered 3.4 million viewers in France, 3.4 million households. Watching the match is crazy, reflecting the excitement generated by the clash between two of the strongest national teams on the African continent. That's a wild fact, just think about it. When they tell us there were 3.4 million viewers, they're actually referring to 3.4 million TVs or devices turned on. And therefore, it's highly likely that many more people were actually watching that match. Just so you can get a sense of it, that's all. It turns out that the population of France is 68.6 million inhabitants. Wow, I'm telling you, 3.4 million viewers. No, that's crazy, but they're telling us this. Although most of the celebrations took place without serious incidents, the combination of sports euphoria and security restrictions turned the night into a test for the police forces deployed in several French cities. That's crazy. I mean, this didn't just happen in Paris, but in several cities across France, guys. This is extremely serious, it's very concerning. I think we still can't fully grasp the severity of the migration crisis in France, but anyway, here they're telling us about multicultural riots in France. After Morocco qualified for the final, the police were forced to charge, guys. This was on January 15th. It actually happened days earlier and twice. Look at this. The chaos. Police running everywhere. No, it's unbelievable. What happened in France is embarrassing. And this was basically on January 19th on the Champs-Élysées. This is chaos. It can't be possible, right? What a shame, really. What happened to France? And you know what's the worst part of all? This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Please, pay attention. The latest? Côte d'Ivoire claims victory in the 2023 Africa Cup of Nations against Nigeria. This is what the streets of Paris, France look like after this victory. Just look at that. This is Paris, France. There you have it. Look at this. And there are people who think you're exaggerating when you talk about the situation in France. The main problem in France and much of Europe is not immigration itself, but uncontrolled immigration. They practically allow anyone, whoever it is, to enter their countries and stay there to live. And look, if you are going to contribute to society, if you are going to work, if you respect their culture and their traditions, knowing that you are a guest, I think that's perfect. I have nothing against immigration in that sense. In fact, I myself am an immigrant. I myself live in another country. The problem with France is that they let anyone in. There's no filter at all. They don't check your background. They don't give you any psychometric or psychological test. What do I know? Any test to measure how good you are for the country, how much you can contribute to society, if you're not a dangerous person, if you're a good person, there's nothing serious then. That obviously leads us to the chaos France is in today. The situation in France saddens me, as France is truly a beautiful country. But it has been completely ruined. France is no longer France. Paris is no longer Paris. It's a finished country. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and see you next time.